tonight's a weird night. Did you guys notice all kinds of wild stuff over the last several days? Yeah, well, I did. And again, maybe it's not a snake cult. Maybe it's something else that's amiss. Maybe I'm sniffing things out a little bit wrong. But if you noticed, if you got AT&T, well, your phone lines have been down. You notice that? A little weird. And all the typical regular doom-mongers out there are like, we told you, China's cracking the grids. The end is coming. Lock and load. Here we go. Ah! So this is what the usual doom-mongering suspects are up to, right? Well, I'm not so sure that's the case because, of course, we are, as we've been talking about, sort of on and off, not really like in a direct, like, step on the gas pedal way, but we might have to really kind of, let's say, grease the skids and talk about the actual solar maximum because, we've kind of discussed it in the past in the periphery here and there, but we are really coming into sort of the next level of this because it's supposed to peak in 2025. And over the last several days, probably 3 or 4 days, we've had these massive sunspots, these, coronal mass ejections, they're called, I believe, except these are, baby ones. And, they're hitting the earth and causing all kinds of stuff. They're causing all kinds of damage and, not damage, but let's say disruptions in our actual communications. And look, maybe this is the case. And so again, all the disclaimers apply. I do not know the answers to these cosmic questions or, national security secrets or any of the rest of that stuff. I just don't know that. Okay. I'm just going with my gut as I usually do and considering that maybe, just maybe, this is something else. And this isn't, somebody hacking the power grid and all this stuff like this. Okay. So that specifically, like I said, just get that out of the way. I'm not here as some guru trying to tell you to go get in the bunker and lock and load. Okay. That's not my game. I'm not the doom monger. That's not what I do. And let's consider other possibilities here because you do notice that every time something happens, everybody's like, I told you, look, I've been saying this for 10 damn years. Like, what's his name in Independence Day, Randy Quaid, right? I've been saying it for 10 damn years. Yeah. Okay. Well, sure. Maybe. I mean, but come on now. Like every time something happens, it doesn't have to really be like a harbinger of doom. And that's the thing that drives me the most insane about this stuff. But anyway, I digress. So we are taking your calls, doing the thing we normally do, but let us begin before we begin. And that means here at space.com, as you've noticed, like I said, the last couple of days have been a little bit wild in terms of these solar flares. All right. Which is, legit. It's legit. This is a thing, right? The sun's out there. It's not something that's brand new. It's been in the sky for thousands of years, all the rest of that. Maybe even more than that, dare we say. So this is the headline from space.com. Sun erupts with most powerful solar flare since 2017 amid explosive week. Boom. Yeah, it's happening, right? So the sun has unleashed its most powerful solar flare for around 7 years. That seems weird to write it that way, but okay, maybe I'm wrong. The X6.3 class solar flare is the most powerful of the current solar cycle, designated solar cycle 25, which is odd that we only count 25 of them. They go for about 11 years, these solar cycles, so 25 times 11 is, I don't know, 300 years or something. Don't do math on a live stream. But that's the thing, right? So then we only started counting that long ago, 25? I don't know. I mean, it seems pretty human ambitious to name the sun only 25 cycles. You know what I mean? Anyway, so the flare reached its peak activity at 5:34 p.m. on Thursday, February 22nd. If we were doing or just starting the show about the snake cult, all right? Sometime shortly thereafter, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the NOAA. I mean, we were doing the snake show, but they were doing, they were watching the solar flares. So this was the third solar flare in a 24-hour period from an active solar region in the sun known as AR3590, okay? Fine. That's all fine by me. But previously, an X1.8 class flare blasted out of the giant sunspot at 6:07. That was on Wednesday, and an X1.7 class flare occurred earlier on Thursday at 1:32 a.m. Okay, so 3 in short succession, and it's not only that, we had all that cell phone stuff go down over the weekend, right? I think it was Friday when it hit, or was it Thursday? I don't know. It was one of those days, right? But it seems like maybe this stuff's related. But maybe it's not. You know me. Per usual, I don't have any of the answers here. But what I do have are a lot of wild questions because this is not new. Again, these solar cycles, these 11-year cycles are this going into the solar maximum, which is supposed to peak around, I believe, July of 2025. So we're going to be stepping on the gas and getting more of these sunspots, which are, firing out, plasma and radiation and, electromagnetic fields and all the fun stuff the sun does, right? It's going to happen, and it's going to keep happening. But the weird thing that I stumbled across, which is the best part of this entire conversation, in my opinion, is what kind of gets us going into the weird and the wild. So shout out and credit where credit is due. Bruce Fenton over on Twitter X tweeted this, and this was on, what day was this? This was on February 24th, but I think I saw it on Friday night. And it says this: "The party is barely getting started. Extensive research indicates direct effects of increased solar activity on human behavior, including rising or falling in military activity." And I was like, that's peculiar. Shout out Bruce Fenton at Geological SETI. Give him a follow on Twitter X. I'll have the link in the description down there. Well, okay, so I started thinking about it, and we've talked about the solar, sunspots and solar maximums in the paranormal sense, and sort of the ley line sense of maybe these electromagnetic charges are sort of bringing energy into that, let's say, human resonance of the Earth, or even the electromagnetic resonance of the Gaia, or the Gaia hypothesis. Back to that a little bit for a sec. But beyond that, it seems like there's something happening here in, well, let's say something that's maybe unaccounted for, something that people don't talk about often. And of course, that means all kinds of ways to look at this in terms of ritual magic, which is, as you know, one of my favorite topics. Because if we're talking about, let's say, harnessing the weather, or we're talking about harnessing, human emotions in the zeitgeist, or we're talking about the Super Bowl as some sort of, really, really sort of a power ritual in terms of human manifestation and human energy and all the rest of that, the human resonance. Well, wouldn't it stand to reason that in some sense there's going to be, let's say, a heightened charge at the peak of a solar maximum, very much like we would talk about in terms of, the actual celestial cycles of the moon, which coincidentally, I didn't actually include it as part of the write-up for the show, but it is strange to me that if we're talking about human behavior being actually influenced by the sun itself, do note that it also happens with the moon. We know this very well. We've talked about this in the past. The ERs fill up. There's lots of arrests on full moon nights. Just, the term lunatic derives from there. Anyway, there's a lot of things happening with this, okay? And we're going to get to them. And you may be surprised at some of the research that I again, based on what Bruce Fenton said there, I had no idea that it kind of went this deep, but it does. It goes incredibly deep. So we're going to get to that in just a moment here. But so consider this as we take just a quick break and get a word from our sponsor. But the moon actually affects humans at the peak of its cycle, the full moon, okay? The peak of the cycle to us, in relation to us. Now, is it possible to consider that the exact same thing happens in a cyclical pattern every 11 years in the solar maximum the same way, or in a similar way? So here's a few things, all right, that I didn't know about these solar maximums and actually how they impact human behavior. There has been science actually done on this. So straight from Copilot here, not Copilot, sorry, the Perplexity AI app, which is incredible. Like I said, I'm not paid to say this. I'm just telling you what tools I use to put these shows together. But check this out. So the relationship between solar activity and human behavior, including its potential impact on military activity and social unrest, has been a subject of scientific investigation. The studies reviewed here, and I'm going to read them to you, or at least cite them, explore various aspects of this relationship, focusing on physiological, psychological, and societal impacts, meaning at the, let's say, apex of the solar maximum, weird stuff starts to go down, right? So here we go. So a study published in 2018 in the journal Scientific Reports explored the heart rate variability, the HRV responses to changes in the solar and geomagnetic environment. It found that increased solar activity characterized by ultraviolet and solar radio flux radiations, affects a wide range of human behavior and health outcomes. The study observed that increases in solar wind intensity were correlated with increases in heart rate, interpreted as a biological stress response. How about that? It's a stress response to a solar maximum. And even, let's say, these solar radio flux winds, which is bizarre as hell. Conversely, increases in cosmic rays, solar radio flux, and Schumann resonance power were associated with increased HRV and parasympathetic activity, suggesting a beneficial response in a healthy population. This study highlights the complex ways in which solar activity can influence human physiological processes. And that's the weird part, okay? Because if you start to think about this in terms of, let's say maybe we're not in I don't know, like an unpredictable cycle. Like these cycles are incredibly predictable, and maybe all these things happen as they happen in a particular time space for a particular reason. Meaning, back to those things I'm always talking about, those pesky control mechanisms. But in this case, in this actual sense, we're talking about the sun as even possibly like a, arm wrestling with Ra or something to gain his favor so that maybe society doesn't tip over every 11 years, right? I mean, we talked about recently those 4-year election cycles, and maybe there's some sort of magic in sort of the shorter cycles of maybe human resonance, or maybe the human forgetfulness aspect in the short term. I don't really know. There's a lot of ways to consider that. We'll bring that back around, but it does fit into this conversation because these are 11-year cycles. Now, on to the next. So here's one with social unrest, another study. Research has linked solar activity with various forms of social unrest, including revolutions and the frequency of terrorist attacks. The solar cycle, with its periodic increase in solar activity, has been associated not only with periods of social unrest, but also the times of human flourishing, marked by innovation and creativity in arts, sciences, and positive social change. This suggests that solar activity may have a dual effect on human society, influencing both conflict and development. And back to that other thing with the stress response that we feel as humans here on Earth. Like we sense these things and they affect us. And again, so now when you extrapolate this out to the larger sense, the larger impact, what the hell's going on? And we're talking 11-year cycles of us specifically being controlled by, of all things, the sun god. I mean, we're talking Apollo or Ra, or right, define it as you will. But I mean, this is very Carl Jung. This is very Joseph Campbell. This is, well, it leads us all the way back to where we started. Meet the old gods, the same as the new, right? Shout out Derek out there. So solar activity and military activity. Here's another one. And there are studies for these. I'll link these and drop them in the chat during the break here. So a study examining the relationship between solar geomagnetic activity and wars in the first half of the 20th century found a moderate association between the number of armed conflicts and global geomagnetic activity. This suggests that factors associated with geomagnetic activity could modulate changes in the dominance of large human aggregates, with wars being a manifestation of these changes. All right, things get weird. Here's another one. It probably didn't know this. I didn't know this either, but this goes in line with the moon, the full moon, and the hospitals filling up, and all the arrests and on the weird stuff, right? So a study focusing on homicides in Germany, the UK, and the USA over 3 solar cycles found that geomagnetic disturbances driven by solar activity were significant predictors of homicide rates in all 3 countries. This study suggests that GMD, or again, the geomagnetic disturbances, may play a role in shaping human behavior, potentially leading to increases in homicides during periods of intense solar activity. Strap up, peeps. Keep your head on a swivel. And that's not doom. That's just people. All right? But always keep your head on a swivel. You never know what somebody's going to do when they walk by. Keep your head out of your phone when you're out there in public, because you never know what's going to happen, okay? Just simple, basic human stuff from a public service announcement from Generation X. In any case, so now here's another one. Solar activity and human happiness. Recent studies have suggested that increased solar activity may have a negative effect on humans from both physical and mental health perspectives. This indicates that the impact of solar activity on human well-being is complex and multifaceted, potentially influencing a wide range of psychological and physiological outcomes. Again, so is it human happiness? Is it stress reactions? Is it the homicide rates? Is it societal upheaval and change? Is it the next war? Is it, this is the type of stuff that kind of makes you scratch your head and wonder what the hell's going on. And are we really that susceptible to something as simple as a solar maximum or a solar minimum? And as the sun goes through these cycles, right? But you know me, I was like, wow, that's fascinating as hell. I had no idea all that was actually true. All that is apparently actually true. It is, just for the record, it is in the sort of budding stage of the beginning stages of learning about this type of stuff. It's not clearly nothing's been locked in for all the rest. As always, if you're doing it right, science is always developing as they get more data and do more testing and all the rest. Just a disclaimer there that just causation, correlation, all that stuff. It's important to make the distinction that just because there are some, let's say, hints that suggest, it does not mean that this is the truth of things. Just to reiterate that aspect. Now, the bizarre part with me is, you know me, I like to get weird. And so in that sense, I'm like, okay, so if this is the case, we're dealing with what essentially amounts to this invisible storm is what I'm calling this tonight. It's an invisible storm. And we don't, without technology to be disrupted, satellite disruption or our cell phones being disrupted, which happened with shout out AT&T customers. I know you're out there feeling a little bit of pain still. Sorry about that, James. He was just talking about it recently. I hope everything's working well with you. But I mean, this is what we're dealing with in a modern society because we have cell phones, we have satellites, we have, all the electronics, all the things you would expect from a modern society. And so you have these things happen and we notice them because our technology spurgs out a little bit. But if you rewind, I don't know, 5,000 years or something, this stuff may still track. It maybe, just maybe, it tracks even harder because let's say our devices weren't picking up on it. Let's say the actual locked in human consciousness of the old days was locked into it because we were sensing it in real time and not actually, let's say, feeling it because our phone went down, maybe feeling it because we got an acute headache, or maybe because our dreams got super weird over the course, or let's say maybe, just maybe, well, people started trying to harness the power of the sun itself through, I don't know, maybe ley line surges, and we've talked about that in the past in terms of, let's say, paranormal activity, like during a solar maximum or, in times of a coronal mass ejection, this type of thing that kind of skims by the Earth, that maybe the electromagnetic field and that resonance of the ley lines themselves are sort of sparking and sort of growing and sort of surging with this energy. And as a result, possibly maybe that there's a paranormal sort of surge that comes along with it, because we've talked about that in the past, the weirdness of the paranormal trope of, kind of drawing energy from devices, electromagnetic fields, all the rest of that stuff, right? So I don't know. That's maybe a conversation for another time. As usual, nonlinear, open-ended. We'll take this wherever you want to take it tonight. So if you want to take it there, we'll take it there. But it got me thinking, of course, but not just that. In the sense of, we talk about ley lines, often on the show, on and off. But the weird part was, and we never quite got back to this. We were having a conversation maybe several weeks back, maybe a couple months probably. But the idea came up of this temporal ley line. Okay, now think of it this way. If ley lines are there, and we know they're there, and they're mostly inert, okay, they're mostly, kind of power spots, but they kind of ebb and flow with basically maybe these actual sun cycles. So that actually means, if that's the case, and you can make a connection there of this electromagnetic energy pouring into our atmosphere and into the electromagnetic field here on Earth, then those, let's say, inert style ley lines become temporal ley lines, and that they are supercharged with power during solar maximums or every 11 years. And again, dime store numerology, all the rest of that. You know me, I'm not a math guy. I'm not a scientist. I'm not anything. I'm just me. But 11 is one of those, power numbers as well. So again, a lot of things to consider here. And it got me thinking in the next step. And the next step here is, if this is the case and we're dealing with something like temporal ley lines, where they're mostly inert until, let's say, a position happens with the solar maximum and we start getting bombarded by these actual just bursts of energy, okay? And then wouldn't it stand to reason that in the realm of ritual magic that, let's say, people in the know are harnessing this power, and this is the time of magic itself? Let's say that magic isn't real, and it's only real once every 11 years for about, what would you say, 12 months, 15 months, something to that effect. And then magic dissipates back into the realm of fantasy and lore. I don't know. I do wonder. But of course, if that's the case, right, and you're able to draw energy and use it somehow in, quote, magical senses and esoteric ways, well, isn't it possible then that not just doing that sort of as a manipulative tactic for, let's say, people against other people, as we always say with sort of the dark magic and the light magic and the rest of that, that there's also going to be a battle happening during that space during those 12 or 15 months of the 11 years when the solar maximum is at its height, meaning that this is when the battles of the world actually happen for that exact reason, because they can tap into this power that is mostly inert for the past 10 years. You get what I mean? Just an idea. I don't really know. As again, all the disclaimers apply. No truth to be found here. Just ideas. But I do wonder. It got me thinking about all these things. If this can affect us, let's say emotionally, if this can affect us, let's say spiritually, this can affect us, even homicide rates, and track it back through history, and possibly even line this up with some really, really grotesque wars. Then what the hell is really happening here? And who's in control of whom, as I always like to say? And, well, back to those pesky control mechanisms and us just being humans. I'll tell you what, it's kind of a pain in the ass sometimes. But again, as an algorithm says, control your mind or someone else will. And if you don't consider these ideas as being real, I think there may be a, let's say, larger problem. Because this is something that will affect us. This is something that has been shown in small doses scientifically to affect humans. So what the hell's going on here? What do you know about this? Is it possible that magic is real, but it's only prevalent, it's only relevant, it's only accessible once every 11 years in these solar cycles? And of course, what does that mean for the larger aspect?